Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I hope the week's going well. Mine's been rather busy this morning. I'll tell you all about it in a moment. Macro thought central banks have tried almost everything, but in the current deflationary climate, monetary policy is impotent and policymakers are proving the ineffectiveness of pushing on a string. This is a Bloomberg View article saying that's good news for treasuries and the dollar, but bad news for equities and commodities. I went back to Chinua Achebe, who famously wrote many good books, one of which was Anthills of the Savannah. Storytellers are a threat. They threaten all champions of control. They frighten usurpers of the right to freedom, the human spirit, in state, in church or mosque, in party congress, in the university or wherever. It is the storyteller who makes us what we are, who creates history. The storyteller creates the memory that the survivors must have. Otherwise, their surviving would have no meaning. And finally, I believe in the complexity of the human story, and there's no way you can tell that story in one way and say this is it. Always there will be someone who can tell it differently, depending upon where they are standing. The same person telling the story will tell it differently. I think of that masquerade in Igbo festivals that dances in the public arena. The Igbo people say, if you want to see it well, you must not stand in one place. The masquerade is moving through this big arena. Dancing, if you're rooted to a spot, you miss a lot of the grace, so you keep moving. And this is the way I think the world's stories should be told, from many different perspectives. Put up a photograph of him. Political reflections, and this was from yesterday's The Trump Show, ready for prime time, Politico. In South Georgia, Donald Trump's field coordinator is a convicted felon who recently slammed the businessman as greedy, self-centered, and solipsistic. In Iowa, the campaign official tasked with picking Trump's convention delegates is a former contestant on Trump's Apprentice television show with no prior political experience. In the upcoming caucus states, Trump's field operation is trying to organize without the help of his top two staffers from Iowa, who dropped off the campaign's payroll in mid-February when their contracts weren't renewed. And in Florida, Trump's team is trying to woo mail-in voters, but they're using outdated data to do it. In short, Trump's campaign remains the ramshackle build-as-you-go organization that it has been from the beginning. This shit is working, so they're not incentivized to change the person involved with the billionaire's political operation. My conclusions are that Hillary Clinton must be relishing the idea of facing Trump, though I believe he will tack towards the center once he has the nomination. The Economist tweeted this map of fences around the world. London outpaces New York as soft power capital, says Deloitte. London is a global city, arguably the world's foremost business hub, said Deloitte. Took me back to my days in Putney Heath, where I lived for a long time, Green Man, where once a fellow with a very tiny dog wanted to set it on me, and I sort of said, step on it, my friend. But he was very unhappy, and then he told me that's a killer dog, you know. It really wasn't, it was some tiny little chihuahua or something. Barclays banking moonshot, says Bloomberg. Gadfly Just Staley wants Barclays to be big and diversified, but it's a bet that requires time and money. Even if the bank's new CEO is right in the long run, investors are unlikely to keep the faith. Considering the amount of optimism riding on Staley's first big results presentation, sell-side analysts expect him to deliver a bigger stock price gain over the next 12 months than any other European bank chief. It was always going to be tough for the JP Morgan veteran to deliver. The disappointing announcements came in spades: a cut to the dividend for the next 2 years, a big dollop of one-time losses and litigation charges, and a commitment to investment banking as a key plank of the business. I think as everyone exits, this is the optimal point to enter the investment banking business. There was a sop to the bulls betting on a radical Staley-led restructuring of Barclays. The bank will cut its majority stake in its Africa unit and is stuffing several business lines, including Barclaycard's Southern European unit, into its non-core division. Even this will take more time and more money. It may take 2 or 3 years to sell the Africa stake, and I think they've got themselves in a trap. They want to sell it, but they don't want to appear a forced seller. Staley said on Wednesday, while the swelling of the bad bank will lead to £1 billion in total extra costs, selling the African business, which generated a better return on equity than the investment bank last year, makes little sense now. It will be hard for Barclays to find a buyer willing to pay a premium when commodities markets are in turmoil and the rand has plunged. Selling looks desperate rather than strategic. Barclays is one of the cheapest banks in Europe, trading at 0.4 times book value. Only Deutsche Bank is cheaper at 0.3. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro dollar 108.54, dollar index 98.48 and change, Japanese yen 114.42, Swissy 0.9993 when I looked last, but that's probably popped over one. The pound 139.87, the Aussie is at 0.7205, India rupee 67.655, South African 12.2770, the Real 392.20, Egyptian pound 782.99, and the Rand 15.5611. When I looked, and that was early in the morning because I spent a lot of time out of the office today. Dollar index, I think, is a buy. I'll put up a 3-month chart. China's credit outlook has been cut to negative from stable by Moody's on rising debt levels. Gold, last trading at 1230.70, and I think that's well supported. Crude oil, $34.30, that's US crude, down today. Emerging markets, Russia's economy is tanking, so why is Putin smiling? With Russia mired in the longest recession in 2 decades, there hasn't been a lot of good economic news lately. But there's one indicator that's looking up, and it's the one that matters most to Vladimir Putin: his hard currency reserves. Central bank held $379 billion in FX and gold as of Feb 19, up $29 billion from the lows touched last April, making Russia the only major emerging market with a gain. China and Saudi Arabia have spent tens of billions of dollars to shore up their currencies. The central bank in Moscow has gone cold turkey on intervention. No amount of spending of currency reserves can stabilize the ruble. It's very easy to fire your whole arsenal quickly, but that would yield only a temporary empiric victory. Central bank held $379 billion in FX and gold as of Feb 19. Have a look at the chart. Sub-Saharan Africa, interesting piece in the Mail and Guardian. Africa must end its addiction to commodities, or it will be the 1980s all over again. Perish the thought. The period of the worldwide commodities boom between the years 2000 and 2015 represents the second lost opportunity for Africa. There was a similar boom between 1960 and 1980. Immediately after the end of colonialism, the major decline of commodity prices during the second half of the 1970s left Africa with major commercial debts and with little revenue to maintain basic services. The current decline of prices tells us that Africa has not learned the lesson of the earlier catastrophe. Barclays Africa stake has a market value of about $4.9 billion. According to Gadfly, that would be too big for Atlas Mara to swallow whole, which is what I've been saying for a while. However, Diamond could, of course, go and look for extra funding, but I think it'll be a little bit tricky. South Africa comments. This was comments I gave to Smart Company. I said South Africa has been struck by a perfect storm. There is no escaping the fact that a president who was lord and master of his domestic domain via a very effective patronage machine and a policy of high-velocity rotation has reached its limits in terms of the markets in particular. The markets are the message, and they are voting on a continuous basis against the Zupta economy. The rand has crashed, South Africa is headed to junk status, and the point is that the model is broken and the pilot out of his depth. This policy-making failure is compounding the problem. I also link South Africa's recent woes to the slowdown in China. Metals and mining contribute more than 50% of exports. South Africa has a very high correlation with China, and therefore at the sharp end of the Africa-China related slowdown. I am afraid, like Barclays, who are effecting a stop loss, that this is going to get worse. The rand is going lower, inflation is going higher, as are interest rates, and GDP is going to contract. Over the weekend, I said the Barclays exit was a vote of no confidence in President Zuma. I said the real reason, in my view, is the Zuma-Zupta volatility. The Barclays Africa exit is a vote of no confidence in South Africa's President Zuma, and by extension, South Africa's gateway position. 2 days before South Africa's finance minister, Mr. Gordhan, presented his budget last Wednesday, Zuma described Van Rooyen as the most qualified finance minister his administration has had. Unless the president is stopped, the Barclays PLC move might well be the first in what becomes an avalanche of exits. US President Obama in this photograph jokes with South African President Zuma, who was talking on the phone during a luncheon. And then on the 14th of December last year, I wrote about this as well when I said the acrimonious exit of Nene hits Africa's economy. And there I said, and the scariest part for South Africa is this: the president just doesn't get it. Put up another photograph of him. Worst drought in more than a century cut South African farming output and hurt manufacturing, curbing growth in the continent's second largest economy to an annualized 0.6% in the fourth quarter. I think the economy is going to contract this year. Agriculture contracted an annualized 14% in the final 3 months of last year, but that's when the drought was at its most intense. The Angolan kwanza is Africa's most overvalued currency based on the cost of a bucket of fried chicken. The currency's official rate is 72% overvalued against the dollar, according to the KFC index published on the website Sagacity Research. It says it's inspired by the Big Mac index. Kwanza has weakened 17% against the dollar this year, adding to last year's 24% decline. The economy is doing pretty poorly and struggling, but the government and the central bank are artificially supporting the currency at current levels. They reckon that the South African rand is very, very cheap. Kenya shilling 1% overvalued. Uganda and Tanzania 13% undervalued, respectively. South African all share back about 50,000, down 0.2% year to date. I like this photograph of Sharpeville, which was taken by Andrew Achebe. Dollar rand will go over 16 again. We will see fresh lows because we just can't price in President Zuma. Nigerian Dangote cement in our home market of Nigeria will increase sales by 3.2% against the worst economic crisis the country has faced in many years. Demonstrates that the Nigerian market is very robust. Nigerian oil shares down 13.28% year to date. I like this photograph of the suntan beach in Badagry in Lagos, Nigeria. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index down 1.3% year to date. Radio Tamazuz says on Juba's black market, $100 now goes for 3,600 Southern Sudanese pounds. I attended the full year earnings release of Kenya Commercial Bank earlier this morning at the Hilton Hotel. And they were good results. Loans and advances to customers up 21.935%. Foreign exchange trading income down 1.986%. Profit before tax up 11.561%. Profit after tax up 16.465%. EPS up 15.275%. Dividend unchanged. It was a very interesting release this morning. lots of interesting comments came out. Joshua says this is the age of algorithmic banking. There are days we transact 1 million transactions. Have a look at this TwitPic of 2015 achievements. $19 million has been dispersed on mobile repayment of 98.5%. This is the model we want to take to Ethiopia, Joshua said. 31 billion in agency transactions versus 14 billion the year before. The number of transactions, agency transactions up 134%. Mobile banking transactions up 98%. Mobile loan applications in 2015, 3.527 million versus 150,531 the year before. Surpassing 10 million customers, entry into Ethiopia via representative office that they did last year. 18% balance sheet contribution from subsidiaries. But interesting, South Sudan, which was 14% of total assets, is now 6%. That's because of the devaluation. Rwanda 3%, Tanzania 4%, Uganda 4%, Burundi 1%. Kenya's now total assets is 82% versus 75% last year, the previous year, and that's all because of South Sudan. Strong numbers. Mobile is showing an exponential trajectory. This is a real solid bank. Strong response in the stock market today, up over 3%. And you remember I said that I thought the share prices were too defensive in front of this full year earnings season. Earlier in the week I'd attended the KenGen first half results presentation. We've posted a link of that. The Nairobi All Shares down 2.68% this year, but it's having a strong day today. NSE 20 is at a 6.5-week high, down 3.88% so far this year. Once again, thank you for stopping by.